So today, we're diving into one of history's most stunning and, honestly, sudden collapses, the fall of the Sasanian Persian Empire. Now, for centuries, this was one of only two superpowers on the entire planet, a massive empire that literally shaped civilization. And then, in the span of a single generation, it was just gone.
I mean, that's a question that feels pretty relevant today, doesn't it? But to really get it, we have to go all the way back to the 7th century. And trust me, this is not just some dusty old history lesson. It's a case study in how the most powerful can fall, how the world can be completely remade seemingly overnight, and how events that seem small can kick off a truly catastrophic chain reaction.
Okay, so first things first, let's get the name right. The Sasanians, they never called themselves the Sasanian Empire. To them, their home was Iran Shar, which means the dominion of the Aryans. That name alone tells you so much. It just screams immense pride, a deep, deep connection to a legendary past, and this sense that they were destined to rule. This was a civilization that absolutely saw itself as the center of the universe. And this image, wow, it just perfectly captures that self-image. I mean, look at the power, the confidence. This is King Peroz, the Shahan Shah, which literally means the King of Kings, showing off his skills as a warrior. And this wasn't just for PR. The whole idea of the warrior king was the bedrock of their state. You had to be a formidable leader for a truly formidable military.
So let's set the stage. The world of late antiquity, roughly the 3rd to 8th centuries AD. It wasn't a world with a bunch of different powers. No, it was dominated by two absolute titans, locked in this centuries-long struggle for, well, everything. So on one side of the map, you've got the Romans in the west, and on the other, Iran Shar in the east. For hundreds of years, these two giants were basically the only game in town. Their border was the flashpoint of the world, and their rivalry shaped everything from Britain all the way to India.
Now, what's so fascinating here is the balance, but it's a fragile one. After just countless wars, the Romans had basically come to the conclusion that Persia, well, it couldn't be beaten. In fact, to keep the peace, Rome often paid what they politely called subsidies, but what Iran Shar proudly called tribute. But all this fighting had a huge cost. Both empires were totally drained, financially and militarily. They were still powerful, sure, but they were also dangerously brittle.
And that fragility brings us to the beginning of the end. See, the collapse of Iran Shar wasn't some slow, gentle decline. It was a rapid, cascading failure. And it all started with one single catastrophic event, the very first domino to fall.
The trouble kicked off on Persia's northeastern frontier. Their enemies there were the Hephthalites, who you might have heard of as the White Huns. But listen, you have to get the image of disorganized nomads out of your head. The sources are really clear on this. They were a settled monarchy. They had cities, they had laws. They were an unsettling mirror image of Persia itself. And for that reason, Iran Shar felt it absolutely had to crush them.
So to deal with this threat, King Peroz unleashes the deadliest strike force in the world at the time, the Sasanian heavy cavalry. These guys were clad head to toe in iron plate. They barely looked human. Someone at the time described them as a moving image wrought by a hammer. Just think about that. An unstoppable force of armored shock troops, the heirs to this legendary warrior tradition.
Except, they were stopped. In one disastrous battle, the Hephthalites chose cunning over brute force. They dug a massive camouflage trench across the battlefield. The Persian cavalry, charging with all that unstoppable momentum, they just plunged right into it. The entire vanguard was just gone, annihilated, and as one source grimly puts it, among the dead was Peroz himself. The King of Kings was dead.
The fallout from this was immediate, and it was total. The treasury, empty. The best of their army, destroyed. The frontier, wide open. But maybe the deepest damage was spiritual. See, Peroz had broken a sacred oath to Mehr, the god of oaths, and so his shocking defeat was seen as divine punishment. It shattered the monarchy's legitimacy. And in that power vacuum, rival noble houses just started tearing the empire apart in a devastating civil war.
So while Iran Shar is literally ripping itself to shreds, and Rome is lying there completely exhausted, nobody was looking south. Nobody saw the storm that was gathering in the deserts of Arabia. A new power was about to burst onto the scene, and it was going to change the world forever.
This is how the big empires thought of the Arabs. Like desert bandits. A nuisance, sure, but never ever a strategic threat. To them, they were just shiftless nomads who lived in tents. They were figures of contempt, not fear. To the sophisticated courts in Rome and Persia, these people were totally insignificant.
But then you look at this. This document tells a completely different story. It's a tax receipt for 65 sheep issued by an Arab war party just a few years into their conquests. But look closer. It's written in both Greek and Arabic. It's dated to the year 22 of a brand new calendar. Come on, this is not the work of some disorganized bandits. This is a sophisticated, organized power. They have a function in administration, and they're already confident enough to mark time by their own new era.
Right, so this is the key point, the speed. We're talking about just 10 years. In a single decade, a force that the world's superpowers had completely dismissed as irrelevant burst out of the desert and created a new global empire. They just seized huge chunks of territory from a weakened Rome and a shattered Iran Shah. It was without a doubt one of the most sudden and world-changing transformations in all of human history.
And the arrival of this new power? Well, that was the final blow. For the once mighty dominion of the Aryans, the end was now completely unavoidable.
You have to remember their pride. This is Sasanian propaganda literally carved into a mountain. You have the King of Kings, Shapur I, on his horse, with one Roman emperor kneeling in front of him and another one held captive. This is how they saw themselves. This was the measure of their greatness, total domination over their greatest rival.
And this is what was left. The throne room of the grand royal palace at Ctesiphon, the capital of Iran Shah. It's an empty shell, a ruin in the desert, an entire superpower, a civilization that had lasted for more than 400 years was just wiped completely off the map.
The fall of Iran Shah wasn't just the end of an empire, it was the end of an entire world order. It created this massive power vacuum that was filled almost instantly, giving birth to a new global civilization and setting the stage for the next 1,000 years of history. And it leaves us with a pretty timeless question, right? When the giants of today stumble, who is waiting in the shadows to take their place?